I know every operating
At my
system like
last
the
job,
back of
in
my
my current
hand.
role,
I have
when it comes to
25 years of
IT.
experience and have worked with several people from your company. I've been recognized for my passion. My team is everything.
LinkedIn delivers candidates who rise above the rest. With an up-to-date view into shared connections, skills, and interests you won't find anywhere else. See why 86% of small businesses who post a job on LinkedIn get a qualified candidate within a day. Post a job for free at linkedin.com/achieve. LinkedIn, your next great hire is here.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour being brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Imports domestic microbrews, the best selection of beer anywhere. Wine coolers, water, soft drinks, snacks. They roast their peanuts fresh and hot every day. 6 great flavors of slushies and ready-to-drink cocktails now. High Noon, Crown Royal, Jack Daniels. And the Pickle Bar, led by the Barrels and the Dills, indeed second to none. All at Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket. Very pleased to bring in from CBS Sports our good friend Dennis Dodd. Dennis, welcome back. Great to have you with us.
Steve, how are you? I'm good.
Good. I'm doing great. The Big Ten got together, and basically all they said was they're just going to look forward to the next week and recommend it be 1 through 12 and take away the automatic bids. I wasn't surprised by that, doing it one step at a time. But in the end, what do you see from these two conferences, and what does it mean for college football?
Well, first of all, the fact that they're even meeting together is historic. I think it's, they announced this, whatever it was, this advisory group last February, and then met on it, basically to talk about playing games against each other. But that in itself was, I think, was important that they met aside from the other conferences. Look, what they're going for is trying to get these automatic qualifiers. They want to rule college football. I'm getting some feedback here. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, yeah, it's just some feedback here. I think they're going to go to, maybe by the end of this month, which is next Friday, they're going to announce going to 14 teams from 12 and to get these automatic qualifiers, 4 each for the SEC and Big Ten, 2 each for the ACC and Big 12, and then 1 at large and 1 for the group of 5. I think that's the way this thing's going to go down if you just want to cut through the hay.
Right, and I think eventually it'll be 16. That's just my gut feeling. Just like I think the NCAA tournament's the heck with 72. We're just going to go to 76. We're going to do it anyway. But I think that's in the end what they want to do with all this. And if they go to 16, they can pass it off as at the end there's 3 at-large bids and Notre Dame could have 1. In other words, that'll be the way of couching it. Your opinion on that?
Yeah, look, I would never say never. All this stuff is layered. ESPN doesn't have to pay for 14. It's written into the contract. So they can do this on their own. And they don't have to pay any more money for that. The schools and conferences don't get any more money. But they do have to pay for 16. In general, as I've already written, ESPN's against all this. They're against expansion. They're against the automatic qualifiers for some of the reasons I wrote about earlier this week, that it's, there's a right here, this becomes pro wrestling. If you know on November 1st that Iowa's in, it's one of the 4, why watch? So you know where I'm coming from on that. But I do think they're going to that. I think they've got to wind around whatever ESPN wants. They don't always get, and these two conferences, the SEC and Big Ten, are going to call the shots. They're going to get input from the other conferences, but that's like input from you when your mother tells you to come in for dinner. You got to do it when you were little. So I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen really quick. And by the way, I'm talking about 26. I'm not talking about 25.
Right. Yeah, 25 can't change, and when they meet in Dallas next week, they can drop the automatic qualifiers being in the top 4 and just make it 1 through 12. That they can approve next week because they can get the 10 conference commissioners and Pete Pavakwa to say yes to that, but that's all they can work on, correct?
Yeah, but Steve, there's even problems there because it has to be unanimous for 25. And if you're, I don't know, the Mountain West, are you going to get rid of those designations, those seeds, those automatics when you just watch Boise State get in? So it only takes one of those conferences or Notre Dame to say no for this to happen. It could happen. Yeah. And it's not a big deal. I don't think the seeding and the buys are a big deal. They'll fix that, but don't think it'll be easy.
Well, when you've got 11 people in a room that have to approve it, it's not going to get easy. And see, here the issue you have right now, to me, is that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are taking leadership roles because right now college sports is leaderless. So somebody's filling the vacuum, and they're doing it.
Yeah, they've finally gotten past they in general gotten past the woe is me. What about college athletics? Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, said last June when we were in Destin, Florida for the SEC meetings, he goes, maybe I come across as a jerk now, but somebody has to be the jerk, and make these decisions, and that's what they're going to do. If you want to know the why, Steve, I can tell you the why. And this is why this happened a year ago. The stuff we're talking about, the AQs and everything else, they even went as far. Remember this? They even went as far as give our champions the 1 and 2 seeds before the season, and that got shot down. But I'll tell you the why for the whole thing. Tony Petitti has, determined that he's got 18 teams, and he needs more access for those 18. He's going to get pushback from his presidents. Why should we be limited? We have the largest conference ever. Think about that. Not just ever. In Division I history, 18 teams, largest ever. So he needs access. He needs more teams in. It gets more complicated for the SEC. They're thinking about going to 9 conference games. Well, there's liability there if you go to 9 conference games. Half your schools, your 16 schools, 8 of those are going to suffer a loss.
They'll lose.
Then you need Then you need a cushion with a bigger field and automatic qualifiers. So that's why they're doing it. Those 2 conferences.
And then maybe to sweeten it, maybe talk about because you have less risk. You talked about 8 schools losing on a given Saturday with the 9th game. The Big Ten and the SEC might play each other in a game, which they can then potentially sell off the way the NFL sold off 2 games to Netflix.
That's exactly what they're going to do. That's what they want to do. Play this challenge series of games against each other that would help. The Big Ten would like the SEC to play the same amount of conference games so they don't get a leg up, quote unquote. So you would have the 9 games, 3 non-conference games. One of those would be against each other, and that further monopolizes the power because that's going to be schedule strength for those schools that win those games. I go back to the old thing. In any of these media rights contracts, Steve, the worth of football is 80%. It's not even worth talking about basketball sometimes. 80%.
That's right.
Within those deals, think about these 2 conferences. In any conference, the top 3 or 4 teams in terms of strength or tradition, history, encompass 75 to 80% of the value of that deal in itself. Yep. So I keep telling people, someday Alabama's going to wake up and ask itself, why does Vanderbilt make the same money as we do? Same for Penn State. Why does Purdue make the same money we do? And then, sooner than later, they're going to come after each other. And don't think it's not going to happen, because it will.
Well, it happened in a roundabout way. You don't think Mike Bone woke up one day at USC and says, why is Rutgers making that and we're the Pac-12 making this? That happened.
Yeah.
You and I both know that.
Yeah.
And he didn't call Kevin Warren. He called Fox. All right? So,
Right.
I mean, contrary to popular belief. And that's what they did. He looked around and said, this is ridiculous. And I say that with all due respect to Rutgers, but, USC is a brand unto itself. The other part, too, is in the last 9 seasons, so 2016 to 2024, there are only 18 schools that make up 50% of the TV ratings, and 15 of the 18 are in the SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, I don't want to say you're not saying something isn't already known, but you're right. I mean, that's why this consolidation happened. When the Pac-12 disintegrated, those schools needed somewhere to go. And the Big Ten held all the cards and said, yeah, you can come in. I think Oregon and Washington are coming in at a half share.
They are. They are a half, yeah.
And I think they get a full share at the end of this current deal in 2031,
right.
Which, by the way, estimates are that the Big Ten schools will be getting $100 million in TV revenue alone. So you see what's happening here. It's just a case of how many schools, if any, do they want to go along with them to play for a national championship?
Well, and there's you mentioned the money part. In the new deal starting in 2026, and correct me if I've got the numbers off here, but my understanding is it's 29% for the SEC, 29% goes to the Big Ten, 17% ACC, 15% Big 12. Notre Dame gets, I think the group of 5 gets 9%, and I think it's 1% Notre Dame or something like that.
Yep. Yeah. That's the CFP deal. I was referring to.
Oh, I know.
The media.
Oh no, the media rights deal,
right.
Yeah, it's going to go over $100 million. There, and Washington and Oregon will be fully represented in that deal. And that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, but the CFP deal is not insignificant. You're right. 58% of the money will go to the Big Ten and SEC, and the other 42% will basically be split again by the other 100 schools in FBS. Some more than others. That's the best way to put it.
Well, and this is a per school basis. Now, with 18, the Big Ten will be about $21 million a school, which is triple of what they're getting now. And because they have 16 schools, that 29% is going to be about $22.5 to $23 million per SEC school. And that's going to, again, same story, create that economic divide with the other conferences.
Right, and it's what they do with it. Look, early on in the CFP era, Ohio State's been pretty good. They won the first college football playoff. They won the latest college football playoff. Changed coaches in between, and still did it. Michigan has made it back-to-back. Well, Michigan and Ohio State have made it back-to-back Big Ten national championships in consecutive years for the first time since the 1940s. I forget which schools. It was Minnesota or somebody else. The Big Ten's doing pretty good right now. The SEC's on the clock. The Big Ten's always made more money than anybody else. It just no one knew it until it became important because of the stuff we're talking about. When the money started getting big after the 1984 Supreme Court decision that deregulated television, the Big Ten didn't do a very good job with it the last 19 years. The last 2, they've done a great job with it. So we'll see.
You know some of the personalities. I've never met Greg Sankey. Tony Petitti I've talked to now several times. So give me an idea about the 2 key players in the room and your impression of each of Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey.
Well, Greg Sankey's a traditional commissioner. He came up as Mike Slide's number 2 in the SEC. Mike Slide is passed away, sadly. Great man, great commissioner, got it into the modern era. And he had named, I think, Greg Sankey as successor, years ago. Then when he stepped down, that's exactly what happened. Greg Sankey's from the Northeast. He went to Cortland State in Upper New York.
Yep.
His first job was at, I want to say, an administration at Northwestern State in Louisiana, and basically worked his way up. I mean, he is a traditional commissioner. Tony Petitti's a TV guy.
Yes.
Brett Yormark's kind of an entertainment and TV guy. We don't have very many of these traditional commissioners anymore. and I think they're playing off each other, the skills of each other. Tony Petitti is I think as we've seen, knows the TV market. I think we've seen that. Greg Sankey is still trying to navigate and piece some of the academic model into this. I happen to think the NCAA model is dead and buried. But he's a guy who was a strict amateurism guy for years until he saw what was happening. Until he saw that the NCAA couldn't legally defend itself anymore, and that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, I mean, they both play their cards very close to the vest. They're extremely smart guys. They have to be to rally those presidents and those ADs, very, very powerful people in that room to get them where they are today.
There are active challenges on the House deal. Claudia Wilken is going to at least announce something, I believe, on April 7th. In the end, what's been your read as to the challenges versus her saying, here's the go-ahead, July 1st, you can start doing it?
Yeah, good question. She will hear objections beginning April 7th. I think that's a period of days. But there are scores of objections. You probably read about a new one every day. I just wrote about, the thousands of walk-ons that are going to be just cut away.
Yep. That's right.
The roster caps. Some of the athletes from the minor sports that filed class action lawsuits or protested because their spots are going to go away. She's going to have to take all that into effect. But the people I talk to, the experts that know better, they do believe in the end she's going to approve this settlement because she's done what she's supposed to do. She's heard the arguments. She's heard the settlement. She was in the room, heard both sides, heard the lawyers. They both agreed to it. And there's nothing she can do about what the lawsuits that are going to come from this. And there will be many. It's going to be really hard instituting this thing. And it may not survive. I mean, I keep telling people the only way, to me, this is all going to work out is collective bargaining, whether they're employees or not.
Absolutely.
And I don't really care because, Steve, you and I have seen how it's going to look for the last, 3.5 years.
Yep.
On Saturdays, nobody cares. Beaver Stadium is selling out. They're competing for the Big Ten. Yep. You don't go in there talking about what's right guard get. Maybe some nerds do, but I don't. And so that's what it's going to look like in the future. It's just going to be a different, where's the money come from? What are they getting? What have they bargained? And I think that's the way this thing ends. And in 2 or 3 years, maybe even less, we won't even be talking about this other stuff.
The one thing I'll be interested in, and you're right about that. People are going to go in and go, hey, look, I just want to make sure that Kyron Hudson's catching the ball. I mean, they don't really care about how much money he's getting and that Drew Aller's accurate with it. It's good. I think there's a Title IX challenge from the Oregon beach volleyball team and also the Oregon women's club rowing team. We know the Biden administration, on the way out the door in the last 72 hours of their administration, offered guidance on how the $20.5 million should be divided. You and I both knew the Trump administration would rescind it. They did. But what role can Title IX play in some of the stuff we were just talking about as this nulls its way out?
Yeah. Real quick, the new administration's rulings on that simply make it easier for these schools to fully revenue share the $20.5 million to adhere to a formula that is basically this: 75% goes to football, 15% goes to 15% goes to basketball, 5% goes to women's basketball, 5% goes to the other sports. That now is pretty easy to defend given what the current administration has done, right or wrong. So there is clarification there that, so what is 75% of $20.5 million? That's about $15 million. So that's what you're going to have to start with in football to compete. And if you don't, and I've written about this several times, if you don't opt into that $20.5 million, because remember, it's an option. It's up to you. You want to fund it, you can fund it. If not, you don't have to. You can do a portion of it. But if you don't fund that $20.5 million, you have labeled your program and your school, your entire institution, with a scarlet letter.
Yep.
You can't. that screams we cannot compete. I'm not saying it's right. I'm saying that's what's going to come out of this.
That's exactly right. That's what I've told people along the way. I said, if you're an ACC school, you're a Big 12 school, and you're not getting the money the SEC and the Big 10 are getting, you still have to put out the $20.5 million because you're going to be looked at as minor leagues.
Yeah, I've written about that. I think I've been led to believe that the 34 in the SEC and Big 10, no surprise, are going to fully fund rev share. I don't think it's going to happen in the ACC and Big 12. In fact, I had one source tell me in the Big 12, half of those schools will do it. Now, I suspect what will happen is they won't do it, but they'll scrape together $10, $15 million for football because they have to.
Right.
They have to go get players. A school like a football program like Texas Tech is all in. They've got Patrick Mahomes financing things. They're paying their general manager $500,000. They are going in big time to try to compete on a national scale. And you're saying Texas Tech? Yeah, Texas Tech. I mean, that's what it's going to take to do this. That $20 million. I know in the Big 12, Baylor will do it. TCU has publicly said they're going to do it. Kansas State's trying to do it. Kansas, with a $400 million capital project in the new stadium, now has this heap on top of it, is trying to do it. I don't know about Houston. Houston's a city school without that much infrastructure, so I don't know.
Interesting times. You're always the best to always get to the bottom of everything. Dennis, thanks so much for your time. Great conversation. Appreciate you so much.
All right, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. And that's Dennis Dodd, CBS Sports, one of the best in the business, brought to you by Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street in Sunbury, the beverage supermarket here on News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships at Bermudan and British Registry.
Okay.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Brewers Outlet, Sunbury Motor Company, and Purdy Insurance. Now, from the Sunbury Motors studio, here's Steve Jones.
Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, best in new inventory, all with great warranties. And by the way, when you buy new, I want to tell you the safety features, I don't care whether it's Ford or Kia or Hyundai, the safety features are just tremendous on them and worth every dime. Pre-owned vehicles. Now, I just bought a brand new Explorer, but now they have 18 Explorers and Escapes now in that pre-owned vehicle lot. Great vehicles. I've had both an Escape and an Explorer. Go for it. And it'll fit your price range. Terrific service department, whether it happens to be quick lane inspections, routine, difficult, they handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. I think the key point in talking with Dennis Dodd was this, with me. You know, and you heard Dennis take off on it right away. But when I brought up the idea that college sports is leaderless. No leadership. So now you have Greg Sankey and you have Tony Petitti of the SEC and the Big Ten, respectively, filling that leadership void right now. So I'll give you an example. Let's go back to the college football playoff opening weekend. Notre Dame plays Indiana on a Friday night, unopposed, great rating. Meanwhile, Tennessee plays Ohio State in Columbus, prime time, unopposed, great rating. But the two afternoon games happen to be Penn State, SMU at noon, opposite the Kansas City Chiefs-Houston Texans game, and the Steelers-Ravens game was opposite Texas and Clemson. Well, you'd like to sit down and have a conversation with the NFL. Talk with Roger Goodell. Who's going to go? Who represents college football? What person's going to say, hey, I'd like to have that meeting with you, right, leader to leader, so we can work it out so it's best for both entities because we're your feeder system and you are the big dog? Well, who do you send? There's nobody to send. There's no leader. You have conference leaders, but no overall leader. Big issue. Big issue. So Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are sitting there, and guess what? In a leaderless entity, these two guys have looked at their conferences and said, hey, look, as I said to Dennis, 18 schools make up 50% of the TV ratings. 15 happen to be in the SEC and the Big Ten. 8 in the SEC, 7 in the Big Ten. And yes, Penn State is one of them. And that's a 9-year sample size. And these two guys have looked around and said, you know what? Nobody's going to lead. We'll do it. But we're also going to do it in such a way where it benefits us the most.
And why wouldn't they?
Again, there is nobody there to lead. Right? James Franklin said at the, I think it was the Orange Bowl press conference, hey, Nick Saban. Right? I think Mike Krzyzewski for basketball. I mean, those are two talented, intelligent, caring individuals. They care about the sport. They care about the administrators. They care about the universities. They care about the players. They care about the assistant coaches. I mean, that's what they've spent their entire career doing. They get it from all angles, from the administrative angle as well as from the coach and player angle. But you don't have that right now. And I don't know how you get that. I don't know if it's something where Charlie Baker of the NCAA says, hey, we need a commissioner for football and a commissioner for basketball. It's what he should do.
But then that means Charlie Baker's given up some power.
What's his power now?
Well, he has none, but he probably doesn't think that.
I think everybody's pretty much saying to him in no uncertain terms he doesn't.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, where Charlie Baker can help, so again, I don't want to be completely unfair to him here, okay? Where Charlie Baker can help is greasing some wheels with Congress because he knows that system. That's his world. Right? As opposed to a Nick Saban, he's not going to know how to deal and what doors to open in Congress. Mike Krzyzewski's not going to know who to deal with and what doors to open in Congress. He'd probably have to go to his senator or his congressman to find out. Okay? Same thing. Nick Saban would have to go to his senator like Tommy Tuberville, or he'd have to go to, I think it's Katie Britt, I think it's the other senator, or whomever his congressperson happens to be, and say, hey, look, help me with all this. Charlie Baker, who's been in the political system a good portion of his life, understands all that, and he can do that. That's where he can help. Because, I mean, Dennis is right, and I've said this how many times now. He said the same thing I've been saying. Okay? And what is that? This has got to go eventually to collective bargaining.
And I think you two are right, but I don't know right now if there's a way for them to collective bargain without making them employees, and I think that's something that they don't want.
I think you're going to have to make some concessions somewhere now with this.
Yes.
I know they don't want to make them employees, but can you sweeten the deal enough where you don't have to make them employees, but they've got the medical insurance, they've got the money coming into them, they've got the scholarship. You know what I mean? You know, can you sweeten it in such a way? You negotiate enough time off in there. You negotiate, instead of spring practice, OTAs in there. You know, things like that. The rules on how much time you can spend with them, how much hitting is allowed in the preseason, how much hitting is allowed during the course of the week, which, I mean, some of that's already dictated and mandated. But, for example, when you talk about the collective bargaining agreement with the NFL, you know, it's more than just how the money is divvied up. I mean, the NFL has working conditions built into their collective bargaining agreement. And that's one of the reasons why the opening month of September, we talk about the Eagles being 2-2 to start. Well, I'm not surprised by that. Are you surprised the Eagles were 2-2 to start? I wasn't. Because those guys aren't playing in the preseason, and they're only hitting 8 days in the preseason. Well, all this stuff you have to make up for it at some point. It's the month of September. So everybody's kind of ragged in the month of September in the NFL because of the way the rules happen to be in the collective bargaining agreement. Well, that's what's going to happen with this. There's certain things you can collectively bargain without making them employees. But you have to have an entity to negotiate with. There's going to have to be an entity that says we represent the players. And it can't be conference by conference because players can transfer conference to conference.
An entity negotiating for all players implies a union, though.
Right, and I think they have to unionize.
Well, how can you unionize without being an employee?
You can unionize by paying union dues. You don't have to be an employee. I mean, because look, part-time employees, for goodness sakes, can be part of a union.
Mm. I just assume once people hear they're unionizing that implies employee.
Well, for example, I'll give you an example. Dartmouth. We all know Dartmouth. The basketball team voted 13-2 to unionize. All right. Now, this is how difficult. Dartmouth refused to recognize them. I don't think people realize. Last month, 6 weeks ago, the Dartmouth men's basketball team dropped it.
Well, that was a change in administration thing, too.
Yeah, but they dropped it. Okay.
They're also in second place in the Ivy League this year, too.
I knew they were worth it. I'm going to assume. I think Yale's undefeated in the Ivy League.
Yale's undefeated. They're like 6-5 in second place.
Yeah, Yale and Akron are the only two conference unbeatens right now. So
Akron.
I know Akron. That's John Gross, the former Illinois coach.
Oh, okay.
Right, and Jones is the He's at Yale.
Yeah,
he is a great talent evaluator. James Jones is a great talent evaluator. He's got a real eye for it.
Danny Wolf has certainly proven him right.
Danny Wolf was a reserve. Young, right? Only playing a few minutes a game. And he told Dalen Cuff, Dalen played at Columbia, now does a lot of broadcasting for the SEC network and so forth, right? And some ACC games. He told Dalen Cuff, because this is when Dalen was early in his career and he was kind of doing some Ivy League stuff at that point. And he told me, he said, that's a future NBA guy right there. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's playing like 4.5, 5 minutes a game. Because he knows. See, Bruce Parkhill was like that. Bruce had a great eye for talent. I've always told this story, and I've told it many times about like everybody being on their own clock. And, Tom Hovass is starting, at this point, and Brian Allen's starting. And Ed Fogel had redshirted, now he's starting, and Bruce Blake is trying just getting along. So one day after a practice, I watched the practice, and I asked Bruce, I said, let me ask you something. He said, where do you see Bruce Blake in this? He says, hey, Steve. In fact, this was the freshman year, so Eddie Fogel was sitting out, okay, because of his back. I said, where do you see Bruce Blake in all this? And he says, Steve, he says, right now he's learning. Next year he'll be a little bit better, but by the time he's a junior, he's really going to help us. Well, and he got to be a junior as the second leading scorer on the team. Talent evaluation. He saw it. Just like, let's give Chris Collins credit. He saw it with Nick Martinelli. I'm watching Martinelli play. I'm like on first year. I'm like on, well, he ain't, he's not going to do much. He played a little bit more last year. Like, okay, he's found a spot. Hey, he's the leading scorer in the Big Ten now. Talent evaluation. But I thought that take the $20.5 million. Okay, so let's take the $20.5 million. That that is the number. So why don't you take it and calculate? Okay, these are going to be rough numbers. But the rough numbers would be as follows. Dennis said 75%, right? All right. So $20.5 million, okay? And that comes out to be $15,375,000 for football. Now, I think that number could get up closer to maybe to 16, but let's just go with, the 75%. Just about $15.4 million, correct?
Yep.
So far, you trust me?
So far.
Okay. Now, let's take the men's basketball number. The men's basketball number, okay, is 15%, as he said. Okay? So if you go 15%, right, and I think this is going to this might end up being too high, but it's $3 million. Okay? You may see a lot of $2 millions out there, but $3 million. Okay? Women's basketball, 5%. All right? That comes out to $1 million. So now we've spent $1 million, $4 million, and 15.4. So 15.4, okay, plus 3, plus 1 equals 19.4 million. That leaves you 1 million to spread, about 1.2 million to spread among all the other sports.
Do they use NIL in football to spread a little more of that money back to the other sports, I wonder, even though that's probably technically illegal?
NIL money?
Yeah.
NIL money is guaranteed to the individual.
Yeah. I'm looking at loopholes more than, rules.
No, when people they'll make contributions to NIL. They'll specify where they want the money to go. So I would like it to go to football. My NIL, I'd like it to go to basketball. I'd like my NIL to go to wrestling. Maybe it's hockey, whatever it may be.
I think the other interesting part about this is somebody has to approve every one of these NIL deals.
Sure, they do, and that's and that is exactly what happens. They have to be approved.
No. When the House settlement comes, somebody can decide that they're giving you too much, that it's too much for your. Can decide they decide to pay Catron $1.5 million. They can decide that he's not worth $1.5 million. Say he can't make $1.5 million, and then say he's worth $800,000. That's what he gets.
Well, again, you can get a combination of NIL money and internal money.
Yes.
Right, which could come out to $1.5 million. I don't know.
No, I think starting in July, whatever NIL money you get has to be approved by a committee, an NCAA committee, before you get your money. They determine if it's fair market value for you. And if they believe that you're going to get paid too much in NIL, they can say, no, that's too much. You have to renegotiate a lesser amount of money.
Well, Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe on line 1.
Yes.
The attorneys Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe are on line 1. They're anxious to talk with you about this proposal. That screams lawsuit. Because what Claudia Wilkin was telling the NCAA, remember the first time she said no? She told them to go back to the table. And the issue was she believes that you cannot restrict NIL.
So maybe that part doesn't get by her.
I mean, I'm just saying, that's why it got rejected, got sent back. And remember, the NCAA attorney, well, that might be a non-starter. Hey, over here in the back, you're 0 for life in court. Maybe you want to keep negotiating. That's a non-starter? Are you kidding me? You're not good at this. You don't have the law on your side. You already had a Supreme Court justice tell you, hey, look, if it ever gets to us, you're paying. Remember we talked about that? We had a lot of fun at that guy's expense that day. Oh, goodness. But, yeah, so she's going to start hearing this April 7th. And in the end, does my gut tell me she's going to say yes? I do. Do I think there'll be lawsuits? Yes. And will one of the lawsuits be about Title IX? Yes. But until they are told differently, they're going to spend the money exactly the way they planned.
Yes.
Right? Which is like, that's why when the Biden administration came out with their guidance in the final 72 hours of the administration in January, athletic departments took it as guidance, not as gospel. Well, we appreciate the guidance. We're just going to do it this way. In other words, we're going to do it until there's a lawsuit that forces it not to do it this way. Right? That's what it comes down to.
Well, that seems what this whole thing has been for years and years now.
Yeah. There are a lot of attorneys that made a lot of money. Made a lot of money on this. Mercy me. It's something else.
I bet there's a whole development in Indianapolis devoted to that was built because of this.
Oh, and it's really nice.
Yes.
I've seen it. It's like, wow, what a place. And it is. But Dennis is right about the other part. Nobody talks about the money part when they go into the stadium. All the talk about money is during the off season, especially when it comes to talent acquisition or with talent retention. That's where people do talk about the money. Once the season starts, people are talking about who's winning the running back job, who's winning the linebacker job, First game of the season. What's your thoughts on that? Hey, they're leading up to that big one with Oregon at the end of September. You know what I mean? People are not walking into Beaver Stadium, as he said, or into Autzen Stadium and saying, I wonder how much Dylan Gabriel's getting. They're walking in like going, I hope Gabriel has a big day today. I hope Drew Aller carves up that Oregon defense today. That, they don't think about it. Fans don't think about that when the games are going on.
No, you'll just have to talk a lot about it this spring.
No, this is an off-season thing.
Yep.
Just like we're going through the off-season right now in the NFL. The off-season in the NFL deals with the combine, deals with free agency, which, of course, means money. Then you get draft choices, which, again, means money, and slotting and so forth, right? There's going to be some veteran that has a contract that may hold out that deals with money. That's the off-season. It's roster construction. That's how the off-season goes in every sport. And for San Antonio, by the way, that's a tough break. Victor Wembanyama's out for the year. Yikes. That's a biggie.
Yeah, it sounds like he was had low energy all weekend, and when they went to look at it, they found out he had a clot in his shoulder.
By the way, Texas and USC are both canceling their spring games. This goes with Nebraska. That's 3 now. Steve Sarkisian, we are not going to have a spring game. College football is changing right now, and we need to do a great job as coaches of adapting. I don't think Lincoln Riley... Did Lincoln Riley give a statement? I don't think he did. A USC source says there's not much upside to the spring game with the risk of injury and, more important, uses for financial resources. The source said... See, it's not Lincoln Riley. The source said the purpose of that spring game is actually serves now as fan engagement, and we think we can engage fans in a better way. Florida State canceled its spring game, but they did it because of their stadium renovation. If you watch a Florida State game last year, you saw like a dark area. Well, that's because there weren't any stands there. They were building it.
I just thought it was the cloud over the program.
Oh, I feel like I'm talking to the suit. Chris Del Conte at Texas said it's not a permanent decision, though.